The morning Jacob Carter lost his job, he thought the worst part would be walking out of the towering glass office carrying a cardboard box filled with 20 years of memories. He was wrong. The hardest moment came later that evening, when his 8-year-old daughter, Grace, looked into his tired eyes and asked whether everything was going to be okay. He forced a smile and nodded. Even though his savings were nearly gone, his mortgage was months behind, and the company he had helped build had replaced him with someone half his age. But fate has a strange way of rewarding people who refuse to let bitterness define them. Nearly 2 years later, the same CEO who had destroyed Jacob's career would quietly walk into a small, forgotten bakery, and leave with tears in his eyes. Before this incredible story continues, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us hope can appear when we least expect it. Jacob had spent most of his adult life working for one of the largest food distribution companies in Chicago, Illinois. He wasn't flashy or ambitious for fame. He simply believed that honest work, loyalty, and integrity would always matter. His co-workers trusted him, customers respected him, and younger employees often sought his advice because he treated everyone with patience and respect. But after a new CEO named Andrew Sullivan took control, everything changed. The company became obsessed with cutting costs and increasing quarterly profits. Long-time employees were suddenly viewed as expensive liabilities instead of valuable people. One Friday afternoon, Jacob was called into a conference room, thanked for his years of service, handed a severance packet, and escorted out of the building before he could even say goodbye to his team. Losing his job was only the beginning. His wife, Hannah, had passed away 3 years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving Jacob to raise Grace alone. Every decision now carried twice the weight because every setback affected not only him but also the little girl who depended on him. He sold his truck, canceled every unnecessary expense, and took temporary jobs wherever he could find them. He stocked shelves overnight, delivered groceries during the day, and repaired fences on weekends. Still, the bills kept arriving faster than the paychecks. One rainy afternoon, while driving through an older neighborhood on the edge of the city, Jacob noticed a faded sign hanging above a brick building. The words Willow Street Bakery were barely visible beneath peeling paint. Dust covered the windows, and a weathered notice announced that the building had been abandoned for nearly 3 years. Most people would have driven past without a second glance, but Jacob parked his car. Something about the place stirred a memory. Hannah had always dreamed of opening a bakery where families could gather over fresh bread and warm pastries. She used to spend evenings baking cinnamon rolls while Grace sat on the kitchen counter covered in flour, laughing every time dough stuck to her tiny hands. That forgotten dream suddenly became impossible to ignore. The building was in terrible condition. The roof leaked, the ovens barely worked, and years of neglect had left the interior looking hopeless. But because no buyers were interested, the price had dropped again and again until it became just barely affordable using Jacob's remaining savings and a small loan. Friends told him he was making a terrible mistake. They reminded him he had no experience running a bakery and almost no money left. But Jacob wasn't chasing certainty anymore. He was chasing purpose. The first months were brutal. He woke before dawn every morning to learn recipes from old cookbooks Hannah had collected. Grace helped after school by wiping tables, arranging pastries in the display case, and drawing colorful welcome signs with bright markers. They couldn't afford employees, so they did everything themselves. Some days only a handful of customers walked through the door. Other days they sold almost nothing at all. There were evenings when Jacob sat alone after closing, staring at unpaid invoices and wondering whether everyone had been right. Yet every morning he unlocked the front door again. Slowly, something remarkable began happening. People returned because they remembered how Jacob greeted every customer by name. Elderly neighbors stopped by just to enjoy fresh coffee and conversation. Parents brought their children because Grace always offered free cookies with the brightest smile in town. The bakery wasn't becoming popular because of fancy decorations or expensive advertising. It was becoming a place where people felt seen, welcomed, and appreciated. One winter morning, an elderly pastor named Samuel entered the bakery carrying a worn Bible and ordered a simple loaf of bread. After hearing Jacob's story, he quietly organized members of his church to support the bakery every Saturday morning. Soon teachers held meetings there, firefighters grabbed breakfast before their shifts, and local musicians performed acoustic music on Friday evenings. Willow Street Bakery slowly transformed into the heart of the neighborhood. Grace watched everything with wide eyes. She no longer saw a father defeated by life. She saw a man who refused to surrender. Every evening, before locking the doors, Jacob reminded her that success wasn't measured only by money but by the number of lives touched with kindness. Those lessons stayed with her far longer than anything she learned in school. Almost 2 years passed. The bakery had finally become profitable. Then one unforgettable afternoon, the front door opened, and Jacob froze. Standing in the entrance was Andrew Sullivan, the CEO who had fired him. He looked different. His expensive confidence had been replaced by visible exhaustion. His tailored suit no longer seemed impressive. He wandered toward the counter almost absent-mindedly, studying the shelves filled with fresh bread, homemade pies, and smiling customers. He clearly hadn't expected to recognize the owner. Jacob's heart raced. Old memories rushed back all at once. The humiliation. The sleepless nights. The fear of losing everything. For one brief moment, he imagined telling Andrew to leave and never return. Instead, he took a slow breath. He welcomed him exactly as he welcomed every other customer. Andrew looked genuinely stunned. As they talked quietly over fresh coffee, Jacob learned that the corporation Andrew had worked so hard to transform had collapsed after a series of reckless decisions and lawsuits. Investors pulled out. Thousands of employees lost their jobs. Andrew himself had been dismissed by the board only months earlier. He confessed that losing everything had forced him to confront the way he had treated people. For the first time in his career, he understood the human cost behind every decision made in a boardroom. Jacob listened without interrupting. There was no anger left inside him. Only peace. Andrew admitted he had entered the bakery by accident after seeing people lined up outside. He had no idea the owner would be the very man whose life he had changed forever. He apologized. Not with polished corporate language, but with quiet sincerity. Jacob looked around the bakery. Grace was laughing with a young customer while carefully boxing cupcakes. Neighbors chatted over coffee. Fresh bread filled the room with warmth. The old building that everyone else had abandoned had become a place filled with hope. In that moment, Jacob realized something extraordinary. If he had never lost his job, none of this would exist. He accepted Andrew's apology, not because the past no longer mattered, but because forgiveness mattered even more. Weeks later, Andrew returned. Then he came back again. Eventually he volunteered during community food drives organized by the bakery. He quietly donated equipment to help expand the kitchen, refusing to put his name on anything. He simply wanted to help repair a small part of the damage he had once caused. The neighborhood noticed. Children who had once received free cookies now volunteered during charity events. Families struggling financially were never turned away without fresh bread. Every Thanksgiving, Jacob prepared hundreds of meals for people who had nowhere else to go. The bakery became known throughout Chicago not merely for its delicious pastries but for its compassion. One local newspaper eventually featured Willow Street Bakery on its front page under the headline, "The Bakery That Rose from Heartbreak." Customers traveled from neighboring towns after reading the story. Many expected to find an extraordinary business. Instead, they found something even rarer. A place where kindness was baked into every loaf. Years later, Grace stood behind the same counter as a teenager, proudly helping her father manage the growing bakery. Above the entrance hung a simple wooden sign Hannah had once designed in an old notebook. It read, "Serve every person with love." Jacob often looked at that sign before opening each morning. It reminded him that the greatest opportunities sometimes arrive disguised as life's greatest disappointments. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, leave a heartfelt comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support allows us to continue sharing stories that inspire hope and compassion. Before this story ends, we have one special request. Please write the words, "Kindness always wins," in the comments if you believe forgiveness is stronger than revenge and that every setback can become the beginning of something beautiful. Jacob never became wealthy enough to own skyscrapers or appear on magazine covers. But every morning he unlocked the doors of the little bakery that everyone else had forgotten, greeted customers with a genuine smile, and watched his daughter grow up surrounded by love instead of bitterness. In the end, the CEO who had taken away his career unknowingly gave him something far greater, a chance to discover the life he was always meant to live. Sometimes losing everything is not the end of the story. Sometimes it is simply the first chapter of the miracle that has been waiting for you all along.